Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to Proper Madness. My name is Sabby, and I give a unique perspective on mental health by providing tools, guidance, and knowledge on how we can better understand ourselves, as well as our past and present experiences, and in doing so, we can help heal our mental health. I get to speak with a variety of individuals from around the world as they share their stories from their journey through their mental wellness so that it helps others stand strong and use their voice. Welcome back, everyone, to Proper Madness. Today, I have Allison on. She is such a wonderful, amazing human being. You have to check out her podcast. I'm having her on today because we connected, and I will let her take the lead and tell you about herself a little bit.
Hello, you guys. First of all, thank you so much for having me and for inviting me into your space. It's always such a warm, exciting feeling when somebody asks me to be on their pod or to do a pod collaboration with me because I'm like, yes, I would love to come and just hang out on your side of the internet for a while. So very, very excited to be here. Hello, you guys. Like she said, my name is Allison Toth. I am a crisis intervention specialist. So I work for 988, the National Suicide Hotline, and I do suicide prevention every single day. It's what I love to do. I love helping people who are in crisis just kind of get back to that baseline stabilization or get help in triage. So it's something that really, really lights me up. It was not the plan. I went to college for 5 years. It was a 4-year university, but I did a victory lap because I was just studying abroad a lot and partying a lot. So I was like, okay, one more year, we'll get this. And I actually graduated with a degree in Spanish and then international studies, international business. And so originally I was going to be a tour guide. I did that life for 2 years. I loved it, but something was just missing. And I felt like no matter how many tours I led or how many travelers I made happy, I wasn't serving my purpose. And so last year I moved out to Death Valley National Park and I was working out there as an event planner assistant. Basically, I ran the banquets. There was supposed to be a captain. The captain never showed up, and so I became the captain, which was stress, but also a blessing in disguise, I guess. And eventually, I ended up switching to the gardening department because I had some mental health stuff, and then I kind of realized during that time, something's going on with my mental health. And so I came home after 4 months in the desert and I completely dedicated to figuring out my mental health, figuring out what was wrong. And it was during that period that I saw the job opening to work at the crisis center. And I was like, oh, I haven't studied this stuff a lot, but it said that they provide all of your training for you. You get psychologically first aid certified, all of these different things. And I was like, okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? Let's do it. So that's when I started working there and I came home, got my mental health in line, and realize that the one thing I really want to be doing in this life is helping people who struggle with mental illness, because mental health and mental illness are a little bit different, and I kind of want to
Yeah.
emphasize that difference because mental health has kind of become a buzzword and a sparkly word, and mental illness is more in my mind the realistic depiction of what it's like to struggle every single day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so well said. I feel like no one truly understands the difference at all because people, I think we talked about this a little bit, people throw around the word mental health a lot, that it kind of negates mental illness, unfortunately. So, but that's really cool. First of all, it's really cool that you got into the line of work that you are in now. Okay, I have so many questions because as someone who know, as someone who publicizes the 988 number, right, for people who need immediate help during a crisis. That must be, how is that for you? Because I feel like it would be very overwhelming for me personally, emotionally, to take that on.
So a lot of people ask me that. A lot of people are like, how the hell? And I'm like, well, for my whole life, one of my biggest strengths has been this ability to really compartmentalize and to go into work and just check whatever's happening at the door and not bring it in with me. And same with
Yeah.
work. I end the shift, it's the end of work. Going home, I'm able to kind of okay, let's leave that at work. We'll get back to that when we come back. And that's something that's really, really crucial for a crisis worker because at the end of the day, you can do your very, very best. And still, sometimes it's not enough.
Mm.
And still, sometimes a call gets disconnected and we can't call them back for whatever reason. Maybe the phone's disconnected. There's so many things that can happen. And I really had to learn quickly not to take things too personal and too much to heart because you will get compassion fatigue really, really quick. and
Yeah.
you're not able to serve others from that place. So you need to be like, you need to be good so you can help others. And I think that, like, for me at least, when I'm in crisis, the one thing that I want in the person that's helping me is like total calm and like
Mm.
rational. Because like when I'm in crisis, I'm not rational, I'm not calm, I'm just like blah. And so if a person who's helping me could be anything, I would want for them to be calm and rational. And so that's how I show up on the line for my callers. Like I get compliments a lot from my friends at the office. They'll be like, you are so steady. Like you were dealing with some crazy shit right now. And you're just like, okay, and what's your name? Like, well, because when I'm in that situation, I know what I need. And it's someone who is not freaking out too. It's
Mhm.
someone who's not like also stressing.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, energy is everything, right? I mean, whatever energy you come with, that's what the other person's going to receive, no matter the situation, like at all.
Exactly.
But yeah, so going back to what you said about the difference between mental illness and mental health, do you want to talk more about that and like what you found? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think that as a whole, mental health is starting to be destigmatized, but it's kind of happening in waves. And we have to understand where we're at within those waves. So, like, right now, anxiety, depression, they're getting destigmatized. And like,
Mhm.
it's normal to come forward and say, okay, I have depression or I
Yeah.
take antidepressants. That's not really looked at funny. You don't really face a lot of judgment or as much as you used to. Whereas things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, these things haven't really been destigmatized quite
Mm.
yet, especially not in the way that depression and anxiety have. Like, you don't see sparkly graphics about psychosis. You
Yeah.
see them about like ways to deal with depression or how to like stop a panic attack or things like that. So there's different levels that have been destigmatized, but there are still a lot of us living with mental illnesses that are not destigmatized. So for me
Mhm.
personally, I live with bipolar type 1, which is the type that if I'm unmedicated, I can experience psychosis. And it can be a very, very scary thing. And when I was first diagnosed, they told me it was bipolar 2. And then before I knew it, like I was in the hospital and I had heard voices and seen stuff. And this is like the stuff that's not all sparkly and glittery on social media,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
hearing voices, like experiencing actual episodes of psychosis or of mania or of like extreme paranoia, these delusions. It's like a very intense and raw and not pretty experience. And so I think that the difference between mental health and mental illness is just like the raw, real cut. And I feel like mental health sometimes can get pulled into the like glittery, pretty 10
Yeah.
steps to fix your mental wellness in a day. But it's important to recognize that, like,
Yeah.
not everything can be fixed with just going on a walk and taking vitamins. And
Yeah.
some people have conditions that do need medication for their whole life. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm. I like that. I like that a lot. Actually, one of my best friends, actually, two of my best friends suffer with bipolar disorder as well, and borderline personality disorder. So I understand the extremities that they go through, because when they're stuck in a certain, how do I say it, in a certain either mania or depressive, I think it depends. That's for bipolar. For borderline personality, it literally is like a different personality that my friend will take on, and in that moment in time, I notice for me, I'm having to switch how I am friends with that person and how I show up and how I support them, and no one talks about that because no one understands that, like, these are mental illnesses that so many people still struggle with, that no one wants to talk about because people think that they're crazy or that there's something wrong with them, or they steer clear of them, like, "Oh, I don't want to be your friend because you have X, Y, and Z," and that's really shitty. Like it's like any other mental illness, like depression or anxiety or anything like that. They're the same, but like you said, depression's kind of become a little too stigmatized. I think depression and anxiety both have been, to the point where now I like, just because I'm a controversial gal, and I'll say it, but just because now people are throwing the word around like crazy, almost using it as an excuse to
Mm-hmm.
get away with behavior that is truly not healthy, and it gives people who actually suffer with the mental illness kind of this lens of, well, you'll be okay. It's just depression, right? Like you can go to your therapist, you can get medicated, you'll be fine. So the
Yes.
extremes of all of these things are like mind-boggling to me still. So,
And I wanted to touch on that too, because like if anyone who's listening, and this goes out to you because I know you love people who have bipolar and
mm,
BPD, and everyone listening, there is a difference. Like it is okay to accept your diagnosis, to get help, to use that as your starting point, but it's not okay to take your diagnosis and make that your excuse or your
yeah.
scapegoat. And so even if you have BPD, even if you have bipolar, even if you have schizophrenia, you are still responsible to show up for your friends and your family and
Mhm.
your loved ones as a healthy human. And when
Yeah.
you don't do that, they have the right to set boundaries, they have the right to take a step back, take a breather. All of those things are well within their rights, because just because you are struggling with something and it sucks and it isn't fair, that doesn't mean that you can show up in other people's lives as like a hurricane. Because I did
Yep.
that for the longest time pre-diagnosis. I was just like, whoa, just like fucking up my life and then taking people down with me. And I looked around and had nobody left and was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is why we have diagnoses. It's not to like ostracize us or keep us on the outside. It's so we can know, okay, there is something in my brain that's a little bit different, meaning
Mhm.
I'm going to have to operate at kind of a different frequency to keep my shit in check and to like
Yeah.
show up as the version of myself I want to be. What does that look like? Does that look like therapy twice a week? Does that look like taking meds? Does that look like
Mhm.
making sure I stay on a routine and get workouts in every day? What does that look like?
Yeah, I love that. I went through some exactly similar with my depression. It took me kind of hitting a bottom, going, okay, just because I suffer doesn't mean I can just be a dickhead and like and just throw all my stuff at people and expect them to just take it and almost place me in this victim mindset to keep me in this box as an excuse of like, well, Sabby suffers with depression, so that's not true. Like you said it so eloquently. Um, but I want to touch on that experience that you went through when you were diagnosed and like some of the things that happened to you, if you feel comfortable talking about it, and like
Totally.
that journey for you. Yeah.
I'm an open book. So basically, like early junior high and high school, I knew something was up. My therapist knew something was up. Like the word bipolar was thrown around a couple times. BPD was brought up, but you can't have that diagnosis until you're 18 because
Mm,
like mood swings are so common in adolescence. And so by the time I was 18, they were like, definitely have some borderline here, definitely are seeing some bipolar traits, but we're not positive yet. And so because nobody made it seem like a big deal, I kind of just went about my life, went through college, was just like raw dog in life, basically not taking meds, just like
mm,
getting through each day. And then things got like really bad. I started having these crazy manic episodes. And then during my manic episodes, I got addicted to pills. And so I started taking benzos, street benzos, which is really dangerous. Like there are many times that I could have died during that period. And during my episodes, I would take these pills, I would black out, lots of stuff would happen, and my life just started like slowly going down. And that's when I started trying to get clean. And I had my first ever like full blown episode. And I
mm.
was like, okay, this ain't it. Like my whole life, I'd had kind of like paranoid tendencies. Like I always have this weird feeling there's cameras in a room, and I'm always like checking the walls to make sure there's not cameras. And so I always kind of knew like something is weird, something is different. But it
Mm.
wasn't until I full blown like heard things that weren't happening and saw things that weren't happening that I was like, okay, this is like serious. And so
Yeah.
at that point, I went in and I was like, what's up? I ended up going to an intensive outpatient program, which was really awesome. Every day we had like group therapy, individual therapy, and then we would have like medication adjustments. And once I found my combination of medications, my life just like leveled the fuck out. And like I
Yeah.
still experience like excitement and joy and happiness, and I still experience lows and bad days, but it's so much more controlled, and
Mm.
it's not this big up and down constant wave. And I found so much more security in myself because like when I'm taking my medication and taking care of my body, my mind receives the message and is like, oh, you care about us. You
Mm.
care enough to do these things. Yay. Okay. We like ourselves. And so it's like a positive feedback loop at that point. Whereas if you go the other direction, you don't take meds, you start feeling like shit, you hate yourself, that can also spin
Yeah.
out quick.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so true. Was there anything that you experienced in your life? either trauma-wise or growing up that you feel maybe contributed to some of your mental health that you were experiencing?
Yeah, so when I always call this my little T trauma that I experienced as big T
Mm,
trauma, because I feel like a lot of people would have gotten out the other side of this totally fine, but because of the spot I was in when it happened, I was much more vulnerable because like we know as crisis workers, if somebody is in a rough space mentally when the crisis occurs, like a natural disaster, they're going to suffer a lot more trauma than somebody who is in a great space mentally. And that's kind
yeah.
of what happened to me. So I was living in Spain in 2019. I think it was 2018. And I was coming back home from like 6 months in Spain, was in like a kind of weird headspace. I wasn't medicated yet. I didn't fully understand my bipolar.
Mm,
And so I broke my phone in Italy. I flew from Naples all the way up to like Florence. And I was like, Mom, I need to come home now. I'm having like a mental breakdown. Like, fly me home. So they paid
mhm.
like, oh God, they probably paid like $3,000 to fly me home that day because I was having a mental breakdown and I was not okay. And I go to the airport and they're like, there's no seats on the plane. There's no seats on the plane. And I'm like, no, 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 I have to go home right now. And so some
Yeah.
guy overhears me hysterical and he's like, she can have my seat. I'll take the next flight. And I'm like, oh my God, you don't get it. Thank you so much. So I get on this plane. And it turns out the universe didn't want me on that flight for a reason. I should have
Oh,
just like
no.
listened and not got on that plane, but I fought my way on. We took off and like immediately I was like, this is not a normal flight. Like this is
Mm,
very bumpy. This is very weird. And I knew that there was like a hurricane hitting Ireland, but that was like far enough away. I thought we were cool. So long story short, we took off and then they shut down the airport like 30 minutes later and stopped
oof.
letting flights go out because the weather was not good for flying. And so our plane just got like thrashed for hours and hours. It just felt endless. And at one point there was like a really big drop where like everyone around me screamed. Oh, and let me tell you, I hadn't slept in 2 days, hadn't eaten. I was just not primed for something like that. And so,
Mm,
like, when we fell, my brain literally went, this is it, you're dying. And I
yeah.
remember like taking out my phone to text my mom, and it like really fucked up my brain. So I landed, got back to the US, and I had never really had like big trauma outside of my childhood. Like, as an adult, I hadn't experienced trauma quite yet.
Mm,
And I was just like, ooh, this feels really, really intense and scary. And so that's kind of where my addiction started.
mm,
Because I got home, I told my doctor, I was like, I will never get on a plane again unless you give me something to fly with, which
yeah.
quickly turned into, I will never get on a train again unless you give me something to. And then before I knew it, I was taking it as needed for panic attacks. And I had never been someone who had panic attacks before.
Mm,
And so, like, eventually I made the connection that, like, when we give people anti-anxiety medicine, we are actually also giving them anxiety with that because at some point the pills are going to stop, they're going to stop taking them, and all of that anxiety is still going to be there. It doesn't just go away or vanish. It's just
mm,
like shoved under the veil of having
yeah.
the pills.
Oh, yeah. First of all, that is traumatic. That is not, I mean, if you think, if you think that, like, I think a lot of people sometimes negate their own traumas, like in life. Like they think, oh, it could have been worse, but I think that's just our way. Like I still do that from time to time. I think that's just our way though of like making ourselves feel better about what we've been through because we are scared of what not scared, but we're conscious of what other people are gonna think if we say that. And any trauma is trauma, like you said. Like it depends on the state of mind that you're in when you've experienced that trauma. If a plane was going down and I thought I was like the last day of my life, I probably would never get on a plane again. I mean, eventually, probably, but it would be so traumatic for me as well. So like that's valid, and I think that makes sense. Like that constant paranoia of like, "Oh my god, my life almost just ended," is huge. Like that's not something a lot of people do experience generally,
Yeah,
so
and it
yeah.
took so much time. And, a lot of people would tell me, like, well, planes are prepared for that. And sometimes planes drop and then they recalibrate and they adjust. And I'm like, yeah, very true. But like, I feel like science takes a back
Mm,
seat when there's so much like raw human emotion. Like seeing the
yeah.
flight attendant look all freaked out. Like, you never want to see a flight attendant looking scared. That's when you
No.
know that something is not right.
No, not at all, not at all, yeah. People do that though, which is shitty, like, if you've experienced anything traumatic, sometimes people have this silly idea in their head of like, well, they're standing in front of me now, and they're fine. It must not have been that bad. And it's like, really? Like people are still minimizing other people's traumas, which is just
Oh
shitty
my
to me.
gosh. If I had a dollar for every person on the suicide hotline who called me and said, I don't want to burden people, I don't want to be a burden. That's the thing I hear every single day. And to listeners who are listening to this right now, like, please know you are not a burden. You are a
Mm,
human being. We need the support of others. We need love and care. And that does not make you weak or anything less. Like,
yeah.
we need connection. We need others. Now, there's healthy boundaries, right? Like, we don't want to be
Yes.
trauma dumping on people all the time. We don't want to be like energy vampires, but
Yeah.
we can't do it on our own either. So it's important to recognize the yes and in that.
I actually very recently experienced something like that. Literally, like last night. I um I had like I think because sometimes when you've survived a lot of trauma or any trauma in any regard, you feel this need to kind of keep it together, um, to an extent, especially if you show up on a platform where you're helping people in some way. You still feel like, all right, I have this semblance of I need to be together in some way to show up for other people to help them be strong too, but then you forget about yourself and you forget, like you said, that it's okay to reach out for help. You're not a burden. Expressing your emotions isn't a bad thing. Telling someone that truly loves and cares about you, or even a crisis hotline, what you're going through is okay. It doesn't make you weak. I think one of my friends texted me last night because I had like a moment. I had like a sad moment where I was watching a show, and I don't know what happened, but like the way someone had described depression in that show kind of hit home for me, and I was like, "Oof." Sometimes I do still feel that way. Sometimes I do have those like really dark, messed up, intrusive thoughts. And so I was sitting on my phone and just like started sobbing, and I go, "I have a choice. Either I can sit here and allow the thoughts to continue, or I can grab my phone, and my sister's literally like down the hallway, and I can be like, 'Hey, can you be there for me? Do you have space right now to show up for me?' And I did, and it was like a beautiful moment. It ends up bringing you closer to the people that you love, And
And I
she was
love that you asked
awesome.
for space. It's
Yeah,
beautiful
I
when
was
somebody's
well,
like, do you have the space for this? Can I put this weight on you right now? Or are you dealing with your own shit? Because I used to be the
exactly.
queen of walking in and being like, my day, blah, blah, blah. And then I learned how to read a room when I was 23, 24. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, you can't. Oh,
Mm.
no.
No, yeah, you have to. I don't know, I guess I was trained that way. Eventually, I just started realizing, oh, I can't just like send my friends 12-minute long voice memos about my life. I have to like I gotta check in and make sure they have the bandwidth.
Yep.
Um,
That's why we have mentors and coaches though, because like if you do need someone in your life that is just like a space holder, a designated space holder,
mhm,
bam, and you'll still have boundaries with your coaches and mentors. Like I'm sure you can't send them 30 minutes at 3 a.m.,
no.
but they're gonna have like really clearly set boundaries and outlines for you to follow. And that definitely helped me having a mentor that was specifically for like my mental health stuff. I could go to her, talk
Yeah.
about things, get it off my chest without having to do that with my friends, because something I noticed with working at the crisis hotline is I can't go to my friends about what happens. And
Yeah.
like that's completely understandable, right? Most people don't work at a suicide prevention hotline because it's too heavy. And
Mm,
so me getting paid, it's not fair for me to come home and then share my trauma from work with people who are not getting paid for it. And I
yeah.
had to learn that really, really quick. Like I tried to vent about a call to one of my friends and she was like, Allison, we cannot do this. And I was like, oh yeah, that's really fucking fair. I didn't even think about that because to me it's so like normal because I
Mm.
do so much training with it. I'm so close to it every day. But to other people it's really scary.
No, no, 100%. Yeah, you have to even with my clients, like, I still have a couple of them, they're like, "I'm sorry to bother you." I'm like, "It's my job. Like, this is my job." I'm like, "You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to, Like, you gotta remind people about that sometimes. We're like, you are allowed to feel your feelings and be in that space and talk to people about it. It doesn't make you weak, and it doesn't make you, um, yeah, it doesn't make you weak, like, at all.
I
So,
love that you are allowed to take up space. Like if there's one message people take over from this, like that's it. Underline, all bold, italicize that shit. Like
you mentioned that there were there's something traumatic that happened to you in your childhood, do you feel like talking about it?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So
yeah.
totally, I had suppressed, I guess, memories for a really long time of something that happened at daycare with like one of the older kids and
Mm,
him just coming in and like touching some of us. And for the longest time, I had suppressed it, suppressed it, suppressed it. And I was like, it didn't happen. But then, like, during EMDR therapy, the one time that I went, it started like coming up and I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I was like, dang, this is something that I really suppressed. And it
mm,
makes a lot of sense of why I have, well, there's a lot of reasons. I had a few instances in college with men that were just like, I wouldn't go as far as to call it rape, but I would definitely say like sexual harassment or like sexual
yeah.
assault and things like that. And when I was in Spain was actually probably like the scariest of them all. I was on a bus. I was going from Leon, the city I was living in, to Madrid. It was like 5 hour bus ride and I had food poisoning.
Mm,
So I'm like super sick. I'm down hard. And the dude in the seat next to me just starts like touching me. And I remember being like so weak that it was super hard to push him off and to like be okay. And I had a
mhm,
boyfriend at the time. So I had like this crazy guilt going on through my head. This guy is touching me like against my will. Finally, I get up and I go to the bathroom and I lock myself in there for like the 3 hour bus ride. And I was like,
mm,
okay, fine. But I have like a huge wounded relationship with the masculine. And
mm,
it has been something that's gotten like worse and worse the older that I've gotten. But I've recently kind of put together that like the more negative experiences you have, of course, you're going to start to see like a downward trend. And so I've
yeah.
tried to make it my goal this year to like have positive experiences with men and to be around men who make me feel safe
Mm,
rather than ones who don't. And so in my dating life, I've gotten very, very specific on what I'm looking for because like
yeah.
if you don't regulate my nervous system, like if you activate it rather than regulate it, bye.
Ma'am, this is my life, and I'm glad you brought that up because as someone also that has experienced sexual assault in my young adulthood, a weird experience recently with a gentleman that like activated my nervous system, but then yet at the same time there was chemistry. So I went to therapy and I was like, I'm like, what the fuck is happening? I'm like, how can I be sexually attracted to someone who is not good for me? And so we sat down and broke it down. Turns out it's nothing wrong with me. I just seem to stay when there's a red flag, and my nervous system was so out of I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I wasn't focused, and like I for some reason just stayed. I was like, no, it can't be me. I must be self-sabotaging. So to hear you saying that like the same thing is like so key. Like you can experience chemistry and passion with someone that you also feel safe with. Like if
Mm.
your body and your nervous system is just going mentally out of whack, that's probably not the right person for you, you know? So thank you.
The butterflies thing, we're killing that. We're leaving that in 2020. That shit's for the
No,
birds.
no
Like,
more of this. We don't
no
need to.
butterflies. That's anxiety manifesting in your body. You don't want the butterflies. You want somebody who gives you like a calm,
Mm,
safe, warm feeling. Like for the
yes.
longest time, I was so addicted to the thrill of like emotionally unavailable men or
Mm,
men who were, already doing their own shit or men who just like weren't into me, just
yeah.
anybody besides a man who's available. And
Right.
like, I think my therapist described it really well. He said that you get so addicted to the highs and lows that in the middle space feels unsafe to you,
Mm,
even though that's like where all the safety is, like the predictability, the knowing. It's actually a
yes.
good thing to have somebody who's going to be predictable and show up for you the same way because you're
Hmm.
not supposed to be on a roller coaster ride. That's not a healthy
No.
relationship.
No, this last thing started at like a high. Like I was for sure love bombing. It was like a lot of excessive compliments. And then all of a sudden there's like a little bit of a break in a pattern, and then it gets less and less, and then you feel like, oh wait, do I need to be giving them more attention to be getting attention? And then it's just like it just gets very toxic. So
I like
yeah.
that you brought up love bombing. So I'm curious about your experiences with love bombing. Have you had it done to you? Have you ever done it yourself?
Um So, I've dated, unfortunately, 3 actual narcissists, like, not people just label other guys as narcissists all the time, but we don't know. They're not diagnosed. They haven't been to a therapist, right? But the ones that I have dated were textbook, should have been diagnosed, like awful. So because I experienced that 3 times, the very first time when I experienced it, I was I don't know how to explain it, as like also a former addict as well, as like a drug high, where when they're giving you all this attention, you feel like you're on top of the world, like nothing can touch you. Then the second it's gone, you literally have withdrawals, and you kind of are craving that dopamine fix again, and then it's gone, and then it's just like it's a toxic cycle, and they treat you poorly, and they use it to manipulate you to get you to do what they want as a form of control. So all 3 of my relationships that I was in, 2 were actual relationships, 1 was just like situationship, and they were all actually very heavily they were all heavily very physical. um no emphasis on a deep emotional connection. So that's been my experience. I personally have never love bombed someone. I don't think I have. I will joke about it with some of my friends that like I click with right away. I'm like, I'm not trying to. I'm like, I'm a spiritual person, and I feel like I think you're in my soul family. That's not weird.
Yeah.
I said that to someone last week, and when we met up in person, we just kind of clicked. And I remember saying out loud, I'm like, I just want to bring up the fact that like I don't click with a lot of people, and I'm really clicking with you, and I kind of like this friendship. And I had to stop myself and go, "Oh my God, am I love bombing?" So I don't think I have, because I'm consciously aware.
No, yeah, if you're thinking about it, you're definitely not. And so I'd love to speak on that because in my former self, I totally love bombed.
Oh
Like when I
wow.
was probably 18 to, no, let's be real, 16 to like 22, before I understood borderline personality disorder, that was such a huge thing for me was I would fall quick and fast
Mm,
because people with BPD are described as like not having emotional skin. So everything is like
yeah.
very real, very raw. You feel things intense, you fall fast hard. And so
Oh wow.
in my mind, I wasn't love bombing. I was just like expressing the crazy amounts of adoration in my heart. But then when I got on the outside, I was like, what were the intentions behind the
Um,
compliments to get people to stay? To make sure they wouldn't leave me, to make sure that they would be in my life, which
mm,
I then grew to realize is not the healthy way. That's not what we want. We don't want to have to manipulate and convince and talk people into staying with us. But at the time, that was my trauma response. And I was like, if I just love them hard enough, if I just make them think
yeah.
they are the best person in the world, they'll never leave and I will be okay. Because that's the mindset behind the distorted thinking with BPD is if they leave, then I will not be okay. And what you
Yeah.
have to go for your target behavior through dialectical behavioral therapy is like, I will be okay if they're here, if they're gone, if they're in a box, if they're with a fox, like whatever the fuck, like I'm gonna be fine.
Oh, I love that. That's I've never heard someone else's side with love bombing, and I like hearing that because it is the intention behind it, right? But your intention did seem seemingly like innocent to an extent, you know what I mean? It's not anything malicious.
Yeah,
I
but
think
then
so.
it still can't be the excuse. It's got to be like, okay, I see this. I see that I'm
Mm,
doing this out of a place of pain and hurt. But if I want to be a good partner, if I want to be the kind of partner that my future partner deserves, I need to show up with integrity. And what that means is getting to know somebody deeper and more fully before confessing your love, right? Because when
yes.
you are confessing your love before you know the depths of someone, it's superficial, whether you're meaning for it to be or not. You
Mm,
don't know this person fully. So if you're in the honeymoon phase with the I love you, we're going to be together forever, stop and think.
yeah.
What's this like? What's their middle name? What's their rising sign? Okay.
What's their look at their chart? No, yeah, the same. I had to do that recently too. I like had to slow this person down and be like, "Yo, dude, there's no way for you to be like this into me this fast." I'm like, "Oh, I know I'm awesome and everything in a bag of chips, but also you don't know my ugly behavior, you know what I mean?" Like,
Totally. At the end of the day, we're all just humans. And so it is uncomfortable when someone starts to put us up on a pedestal. And I've had a couple friends in the past just be like, Allison, I know you're coming from a good place. Stop idealizing me.
mm,
Okay. I'm a human. I'm a person. When you say, like, I want to be like you, I aspire for that, I wish I had your life, it makes us feel like you think there's some kind of like difference and like
Yeah.
we're up here and like it's not, we're all just humans. And so I've had to realize even in my friendships, like love bombing isn't it. You are safe to just give love. Like you don't have to overwhelm people with love. And I think that there's probably a difference between a narcissist love bombing and somebody with BPD love bombing,
Yeah.
especially with the intention. Like maybe a narcissist wants to control you,
Yeah.
whereas someone with BPD is just terrified you're going to leave. But at the same time, they both stem from insecurity,
Mm.
from like a lack of sense of self. And we need these things if we're going to be successful in our relationships.
Oh, that was so well, like you said that so perfectly. Because a lot of people don't understand. I think there's a lot that people still don't understand about BPD or bipolar. Do you want to talk about both of those and what it's like? You know what I mean? Like what, you don't have to run through the symptoms or anything like that, but just people need to be more aware of it, I think.
Totally. And explaining the key differences is huge because a lot of people use them interchangeably and they're
They
not.
they
So
do, yes. I was for a long time, and then I had two friends that had one had bipolar and one has BPD, and I was like, oh, they're different.
they're
So
very different. Yeah,
yeah.
but we don't know until we know. So once you know, then you're good. But
Yeah.
the key differences, you guys, like bipolar disorder is very, very cyclical and it kind of comes in waves. So you'll experience like weeks of mania, feeling elevated, feeling like you're on top of the world, no one can touch you, you're the shit. And then you'll fall into weeks and weeks of depression, having trouble leaving bed, having to really work hard to have an appetite or just care about life.
Mm.
Now, bipolar type 1 and 2 are a little bit different. In that bipolar type 2, you experience hypomania, which is like a less severe form of mania. And type 1, you experience mania, which can hospitalize you, require you to have medications administered to get you stable again, stuff like that. And so, if you hear of someone who's kind of like sounding more on the schizophrenia side, that's usually bipolar 1 because it does include those psychotic features. Borderline is not a chemical thing. You are not born with borderline. Borderline is something that develops because it's a personality disorder. And then borderline, I would say, so bipolar has like the weeks of highs, weeks of lows. Borderline in one single day can be like boop, 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 up, down in one day. So somebody experiencing bipolar probably swings every few weeks, even if they're rapid cycling. It obviously varies a lot, but generally. And then people with BPD can swing like 10 times a day. I mean, there's really no limit. And the key difference that I think is most worthy of being noted is the treatment plans are a little bit different. If you are bipolar, you are likely going to be prescribed medication for your whole life. If you're living with borderline, you may be prescribed an antidepressant to help with the lows. You may be given a mood stabilizers to help with the mood swings, but ultimately you can get off of medication eventually.
Mm.
It's going to take years of DBT therapy. It's going to take years of mood tracking, building those skills, learning how to emotionally regulate, but it's an option to eventually not be taking the meds. My bipolar people typically are on medication their whole life
Mm.
unless they figure out, like, God, I don't know. A lot of people talk about cracking the code and like being able to go
Yeah.
unmedicated as bipolar. It's not me, so I can't speak from that stance because for me, I think I will always take my meds because they
Yeah.
keep me level and steady and safe and in a good spot in my brain where I feel safe and at home
Yeah.
in my own mind. So I can't speak on that side of the non-medicated life, but for me, I mean, it works.
That's good. That's awesome. What are some of your ways that you emotionally regulate? Like, what are some of the, like the habits that you've built up that have worked that work for you?
Getting some movement in every single day, non-negotiable. I move my body, even if it's dancing or stretching, whatever. Another one is just like lots and lots of breath work and lots of
Mm.
mindfulness and trying to find the present when I can. And then I would say my favorite is using music to self-regulate. If you live with bipolar or BPD, music can be such a powerful tool. Like literally, if I'm feeling super, super low, I find a song that represents the mood I want to be in. So maybe it's
Mhm.
EDM, maybe it's rap, maybe it's something hype. I blast that shit. And then 3 minutes later, I can feel my mood starting to like lift up like a little air balloon or something. So you would be
Yes.
surprised at the power of music therapy.
Oh, music is, I did a whole series on my podcast called Lyrics of the Mind, just because music for me has always been something that like it helps you emote certain emotions that maybe are stuck, but it also helps you change emotions too. Like this morning I was in a little bit of a funk, probably because last night I had a sad situation moment. And so I was like, all right, on my way to the gym, I'm gonna play my like goth femme fatale playlist, and it just shifts your perspective and your mood, just like that. And that's not avoiding your emotions, that's just choosing to feel in a different way, you know? So
Totally. And it's like all emotions are welcome. Like, we're not good
mhm.
vibes only here. All feelings are welcome and they can be processed. But sometimes, if you're like, okay, I've been feeling a lot of pain, I'm done feeling pain for now,
Yep.
you can put a pin in it. You guys, something I've realized lately is the work's never going to be done. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to take a break and take a second and be like, okay, there's a lot of intense healing to do. I'll do it tomorrow. Like tonight,
Exactly.
I'm just like here. I'm me. I'm maybe creating art. Maybe I'm playing. I'm just existing. But
Mm,
we never are done with the work. And like
yeah.
that's something that really hit me lately. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of scary, but also inspiring knowing that like this is a lifelong journey.
Yeah. For you, when you were experiencing all that adversity in like your early adulthood, what was the mindset shift for you to kind of come out of it and go, okay, I need to start dedicating more like time to myself and get some help and improve my mental health?
Yeah, I would say just like healing my relationship with myself is what did it because there was
Mm.
so long that I hated myself to the point where I was like, why would I get better? I don't care about myself. So why would I spend all this time, money, and energy healing somebody that I don't fuck with? And then
Yeah.
I started to slowly heal how I saw myself. And then I was suddenly like, oh my gosh, I don't want to not sleep for days at a time. I don't want to struggle in all of my relationships and constantly be losing friends because of my actions. Like, I want better for me. I deserve better than the life that I've been giving myself. So
Mm.
I'm going to do whatever the hell that is that I have to do to kind of switch the narrative and come back into this place of like living for myself rather than just responding and reacting. Or, yeah, I should say, rather than reacting, I started
Mm.
to like respond to things and like pause, take a sec instead of just like bam, bam, every single decision, just like on a whim.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to be that way for sure too. The difference between reacting and responding is taking time. That's it. And just
Huge.
a pause.
So I'd like to hear a little bit just about your tie into the mental health community and what
Mhm.
makes you passionate about mental health advocacy.
That's a loaded question, I'll tell you that much.
I'm good for those.
I would say in a nutshell for me, it was eventually like coming through. So I'm the opposite of you. I've had like 5 or 6 big traumas, and I'm a highly sensitive person, so the traumas impacted me would you imagine, it impacted me deeper than any other normal person that would have gone through it if they weren't a highly sensitive person. So, the fact that I even made it out and survived, like, several suicide attempts of I mean, these are attempts that, like, I was fully in the middle of doing so, and then I had some sort of divine intervention every time that stopped me in the middle. And it's always been my little brother, which is, like, crazy to me. So, through those moments, I eventually down the line when I started healing and I got help, I realized that like so many people suffer with just their mindset of adversity through those hard times because you let those intrusive thoughts just kind of overwhelm you, eat you up inside, and you start thinking and believing those thoughts. And those thoughts truly aren't you. It's like the voice of someone else deep back in your childhood that probably gave those thoughts to you and that made you feel like you weren't worthy of being alive or here. And so through that, I started just expressing like what I had learned. And I was like, people need to learn what I've learned and how I
Mhm.
figured this out. And I went to, I did like a lot of like healing and therapy around PTSD. And I started picking things up and learning things that other people weren't really keeping. Like a lot of people kind of go to therapy and experience it. And then they don't realize that like after you leave, it's up to you to take what you've learned and change yourself and your life. Like no one's going to do it for you. So I've kind of just adopted this mentality of very recently like using that deep pitted darkness that we've all faced in our life to help us see the light because you don't without dark you're not going to have light, right? And a lot of us stuff the darkness away instead of using it to kind of propel us into who we're meant to be.
Mhm.
So for me that's huge. Like I love helping people. like through some of their darkest times. It's never easy for me to do that as a coach, especially because I'm incredibly empathetic and I can literally feel what other people are feeling. So I always take time to be like, you know what, if this can help someone, great. Like I have a client that I had for 6 months, and at the end of it, he said to me, he goes, Sabby, I don't think I need you anymore, but I'd like to check in with you like every so often. And that made me happy. Whereas like some coaches in the world would probably disagree with me and be like, you're losing business. Like, no, I'm not. I helped someone and they can help themselves now. That's what matters, you know?
That's the
So
goal.
yeah.
First of all, thank you for your beautiful vulnerability on that. I think that
Thank
when we
you.
speak about these dark times and when we bring light to them, it's helping so many more people than we realize. And the ripple effect is seriously amazing. And so I'm sure that your message is reaching so many hearts and so many people can resonate and like we'll see a lot of light in your bravery. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've always forget like what I've been through. Like I make my big traumas little traumas all the time. And like I think when I ever tell people like specifics that I've ever been through on like I've only been on like a couple other podcasts, and when they sit down they're like, "So what brought you through like what have you been through?" I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Let me hang on. Let me just get I should just write a book at this point."
Right. How much time do you have is the
Like how much
question.
time? Yeah. And it gets dark fast. And so the way that some people react to it always just says volumes to me. But I resonated with what you said in the beginning where you were like a lot of people wouldn't consider this trauma. I'm like, no, dude, I'd consider that like a big trauma. That's like a lot of shit to go. Everyone's been through something, something traumatic in some way. People just pretend like they haven't for some reason. Like they want to think that they had a perfect, shiny, happy childhood. And that might be true. Like that's awesome, cool, good for you. But also like there's probably other things that you've been through that are traumatic that you're not looking at, you know? So
Totally. It's also relative. Like I remember like a year ago telling somebody about my first suicide attempt and they were like, "First?" And I was like, "Well, doesn't everybody go through that?" Like I
yeah.
literally thought that everybody tried to kill themselves at least once in their life. I thought that was like the norm, the standard,
Oh,
until I
no.
said it in a room full of crisis workers and everyone was like, they're like, it's okay and it's normal and we get that, but like that
Yeah,
is not an everybody thing. That is like
dude.
someone who is struggling with severe mental illness. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh."
Yeah,
I
no, I
was
had the
calling that tiny T trauma.
we're like the same, but like the opposite, because I was the opposite. I was like, no, no one's done this. I'm alone. Like I fully was just like, this is my own thing. And then started going to like group therapy, and I was like, oh, holy shit, there's
I'm
more.
not alone.
Yeah. And first it's weird because you want to think that like you're all important and like your trauma is the only trauma that matters, but everyone's been through something, you know? So,
Yeah. And we're all just growing and moving
yeah,
along and doing what we can do.
exactly. If anyone has related to anything that you've been through, or they've resonated with it in some way, what would be the advice that you give them? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so if you're sitting here and maybe the stuff about bipolar borderline resonated, or maybe just like the message of taking your pain and turning it into purpose resonated, I just want you to remember that like this life only happens to us once. Like this is, I do believe in reincarnation. That's besides the fact. This specific life that we are living right now only happens one time. And you can spend it at war with yourself and at war with your mind every single day. Or you can say, no, thank you. And you
Mm.
can start to heal and you can start to show yourself grace and forgiveness and kindness. And so when you are living in free will, you have the power to choose. I urge you to choose to be kind to yourself. Like that's the only thing in this world that you can control 100% of the time. And so I encourage you to lean into that and make that your superpower. Like nobody else controls the way that you treat yourself and the way that you talk to yourself. You are the one at the driver's seat. Like intrusive thoughts will come, but it's up to you to kind of let those roll out and filter out and keep and hold on to the thoughts that feel good to you and feel like medicine to your soul. So my advice for you is to just like love yourself, be kind to yourself, and let yourself be a human because that's all we are. We're just humans doing our best.
Oh my God, I love that. That touched my soul. Okay, so before we wrap it up, do you want to tell people where to find you? your social media, all the things, your podcast, you can plug.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if you guys want to check out my podcast, she will be coming on it. I'm gonna have a little episode and we're gonna do like a part two to this basically. It's Wishing You Wellness on Spotify or Apple. You can check out my website. It's xoxoallisoncoaching.com. I have like free programs that you can check out, some resources, fun stuff like that, the website. And then on Instagram, I'm at wishyouwell.podcast. So reach out to me, say hello. I'm super, super excited to have you on my show also. And thank you so much for having me. This has been so special. And this
Oh,
was such a like wonderful conversation for the soul. I feel very lit up after
oh,
this.
good. I'm glad. Yeah, I truly like I really enjoyed having you on too. This has been like a very, very good conversation, and I'm looking forward to coming on to yours too. So, thank you so much for listening, and remember, you have to go through the eye of the storm to see the clear horizon ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next week.